Why did you get fired? Because my boss told me some shit she wasn't supposed to, and then got rid of me, presumably out of fear that I would report her. I got fired, but the joke's on her because I reported her as well. Nuclear option baby. Mutually assured destruction. Because I saved a man from being crushed to death by thousands of pounds falling. Reason given, I put my hands on another employee. Refused to work 13 hours instead of the 8 hours that were written on the contract I signed. I communicated with a client that I had always kept the lines of communication open with because none of the higher-ups would ever respond to their questions. I had just had a performance review giving me perfect scores and commending me for maintaining such a positive relationship with this client. I had never been written up before. No PIPs, corrective action plan in my 5 years there ever. 2 weeks after my perfect performance review, I was put in a PIP for communicating with the client. It was standard conversation, just the type of convo we had always, so that we could make sure the project was performing as planned and that deadlines were going to be met. I guess my critical mistake was having a conversation with my boss to keep her in the loop that the client relationship was fine and we were good. My very first PIP was a final warning. I had a new job 3 days later and my previous employer got mad at me because they lost the client and the account when I left because they knew the only person who ever communicated with them was gone. My new job included a $30,000 raise, so no complaints here. But I was pissed at the time. It just felt extremely unfair. Okay, so hear me out, this was technically my fault, but also kinda not. I used to work at this cute little boutique and one day a customer came in being super rude. Like, yelling at me because we were out of some scarf she wanted. I stayed polite, but when she said I'm never shopping here again, I just replied, okay, have a nice day. Apparently, that was too much sass and my manager fired me for not diffusing the situation. Honestly, no regrets, retail is wild, and I'm happier now working somewhere with less drama. I took a job that wasn't a good fit for me because of the high pay, but the long hours, long commute, and monotonous work quickly made me hate it. Because of that I didn't really give a shit and was a poor performer and was eventually let go. That was my money isn't everything lesson. I took a lower paying job with a much shorter commute and better hours and was much happier. Plus it had more growth opportunity. I once got fired because I refused to work off the clock. There were some incoming auto parts that weren't put away by the prior day's team. My boss wanted me and a coworker to put those items away before we clocked in. I said that I would put them away, but only on company time. He said nope, you're fired. I sued him for unemployment benefits and I won. Drug problem. Was completely unreliable. Told them I would be taking a day off to see my brother graduate from college in 2 weeks, told them in my interviews. They approved it then, but when that day rolled around they took it back. Never left a job so quick and with so little remorse. Fuck those guys. Complained about experiencing harassment at work to WorkSafe BC and was terminated. Prohibited action. Awaiting a settlement. A nonprofit hired me to be a full-time grant writer, but it quickly became clear that they didn't understand how the grant process worked. They thought I could just send a letter and say we need a new printer. Money, please exclamation. I tried to explain that grant funders were only really interested in funding projects that would have measurable impact on the nonprofit's clients. But every project I proposed, they said no, they didn't have time or staff to spare. While this was going on, they fired their director of communications. That was my previous job title and I had loads of experience. My resume matched everything they needed. But when I asked to transfer to that position, they said no with no explanation. Finally, they just ended the grant writer position. They ended up firing me right before Christmas. Nice folks, huh? I've only been fired once. I was in my 20s. I was working at a now defunct bookstore chain. I was the only employee on for the entire day because they were trying to save money by only scheduling 2 at a time and the manager had disappeared on me. It was slammed. I was also trying to do inventory which was supposed to be submitted in a few days. A mystery shopper came in and flunked me because I didn't greet her within whatever minutes of her coming in and didn't offer to sell her a membership when she bought her 3 magazine that it wasn't good towards. No mention of me literally running around trying to help people all by myself. Failing the mystery shop turns out was a fireable offense. I prevented a patient from committing suicide. I was let go cause I got physical with the patient. I grabbed his wrists to prevent him from pulling out his air tubes. The family of the patient would protest this action, and even be the reference I needed to get a better job, while they hounded my former employer with bad reviews and used their influence to literally end the temp employer. Company reorganized and my new manager inherited me. She didn't want me so set outrageous and unattainable goals. Within 1 month, I was put a PIP, and those goals were unattainable. She didn't want to listen as to why the goals were simply impossible and what she wanted didn't shoehorn into her current process. She wanted me gone. I killed myself trying to meet them. Last I heard, they moved 2 people into the position to do my job and the 2 people couldn't do it. Lesson learned. Being fired doesn't make you a failure. I am now working for a unicorn of a manager and team. If you see NTNA. Had a boring office job where I didn't have enough work to do, so I spend most of the day on Reddit or otherwise screwing around. It sounds fun and it was nice for a little bit at the start, but it quickly becomes soul-crushing to be so bored every day, all the time. It led to me developing pretty serious depression, so I would start to do things like come in hours late, go to lunch, and not come back, just not even caring because I was so done with everything. Eventually they had a meeting with me where they basically said I had no more chances and if there were any more problems I was going to be fired. You'd think this would have finally convinced me to stop, but no. Later that very same week, my boss left the office an hour early on Friday afternoon. So my dumbass thought, well, if he's gone I can skip out too, no one else is here to notice. So I left a few minutes after him. I come back on Monday only to find out that the boss had come back to the office a few minutes after he left because he forgot something. So he obviously saw I was gone and that was it. Fired. I'm not complaining or saying I didn't deserve to be fired. I absolutely deserved it. They gave me so many chances and I was just too messed up mentally to do the things I needed to do. I refused to rip improperly applied tape off a recently declawed cat's feet and instead chose to do it in a painless manner with spray that dissolved the adhesive like I had been trained to do in another clinic. I chose not to inflict pain on a cat they had already caused irreparable damage to. Do not declaw your cats. I don't care if it's still legal where you live. It's cruel and inflicts lifelong pain. Reading this question while I'm at work is very unsettling. I'm not going to be fired, am I? After 2 years there they didn't want to raise my pay above min wage, and figured it would be easier to hire train someone who and pay them min wage for a pretty demanding role. Plot twist. They had to replace that role at least 3-4 more times within the following 6-7 months. Heard from a colleague about it. I had sex with the cleaning woman on the desk of my office. Never fired, but I quit my very first job at Wendy's when I was 15 because the manager pulled me into the walk-in freezer and showed me his nuts.